The global press and European leaders reacted sharply to the public diplomatic scandal between US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy during their meeting in the Oval Office. According to journalists from the Financial Times, Vice President JD Vance and President Trump appeared to have prepared for a confrontation with Zelenskyy, possibly to weaken his position ahead of future negotiations.
In the past 2 weeks, Trump has done everything to undermine Zelenskyy, making early concessions to Moscow and depicting Ukraine as the aggressor in the three-year war. From the Financial Times publication.
The New York Times describes the meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump's team as a diplomatic confrontation. According to the media, Trump and Vance criticized Zelenskyy for allegedly not being sufficiently grateful for U.S. support in Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression and tried to pressure him into accepting a peace deal on terms dictated by the U.S.
The president's verbal assault on Mr. Zelenskyy was a stunning display of anger and resentment toward the leader of a country that has been invaded by a larger power intent on eliminating it as an independent state. No other president in memory has lashed out at a visiting foreign leader in the Oval Office on camera in such a vituperative way, not even at an adversary of the United States, much less a putative ally. From the New York Times publication.
The New York Times also pointed out that Trump's behavior raised serious questions about the reliability of the U.S. as an ally. A hostile meeting in which Trump and JD Vance publicly literally berated Volodymyr Zelenskyy. This is how the Wall Street Journal describes the situation in the Oval Office. Journalists compared this meeting to a bar fight when Trump and JD Vance demanded respect and gratitude from Zelenskyy. According to Spiegel journalist René Pfister, Trump not only poorly prepared any potential deal, but even worse, created the impression that there is no clear difference between Russia, the aggressor, and Ukraine, the victim of the aggression.
Trump's foreign policy, based solely on power dynamics, sends an unmistakable message to the old world. There are no longer any guarantees or reliability in relations with the U.S. The transatlantic alliance is dead. We now live in new geopolitical jungles, ruled by those who believe only in tanks and nuclear warheads. Trump may still claim loyalty to NATO, but what is the word of someone who called Zelenskyy a dictator just to push through a favorable deal worth? From the Spiegel publication.
Regardless of personal opinions about Zelenskyy or his rhetoric, what matters is that he represents a nation under attack, defending itself heroically every day. Meanwhile, not a single word was said about Vladimir Putin. As Bild noted, what occurred in the Oval Office was simply indescribable. Many other German outlets published similar coverage.
They spoke loudly and harshly, sometimes wagging their fingers. They interrupted the Ukrainian president, mocking him and his people on camera. It was painful to watch, not only because it significantly worsened Ukraine's chances of defending itself against Russian attacks, but also because of the sheer disrespect shown by the U.S. president and his vice president towards the representative of a country under assault. From the Zet online publication.
In a Guardian article titled "Diplomacy Dies on Live TV," the White House meeting was called one of the greatest diplomatic disasters in modern history.
As Trump got into a shouting match with Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelenskyy, a horrified Europe watched the post-Second World War order crumble before its eyes. Never has a U.S. president bullied and berated an adversary, still less an ally, in such a public way. Zelenskyy found himself ambushed by Trump and his serpentine vice president, JD Vance. He was expected to sit back and take a beating. He refused. From the Guardian publication.
During the meeting, Trump and Vice President JD Vance accused Zelenskyy of allegedly being insufficiently grateful for U.S. support in Ukraine's fight against Russian aggression. However, CNN reported that since 2022, Zelenskyy has publicly expressed his gratitude to the U.S., its officials, and its citizens at least 33 times. The outlet even published a list of Zelenskyy's public statements in English, all containing words of thanks to the United States. Reported by Sergey Kulas, Natalia Husak, Volodymyr Shtanghelov, UATV News.
The administration of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has informed European officials that they want to achieve a ceasefire in Ukraine by 20 April, wrote Bloomberg, citing its sources. The European Union was skeptical about Washington plans. In Brussels, they tend to believe that the first results of the peace talks will come most likely by the end of 2025. Europe is seriously concerned that Washington will start a dialogue with their aggressor without the participation of Ukraine and the European Union.
President Trump says that the killing should stop. Putin can stop the killing by stopping bombing Ukraine. This is doable if there is a will. It is clear that any deal behind our backs will not work. Any agreement will need also Ukraine and Europe being part of it, and this is clear that appeasement also always fails. So Ukraine will continue to resist and Europe will continue to back Ukraine.
The promise to end Russia's war against Ukraine as soon as possible was one of the key campaign promises of Donald Trump.
Zelenskyy wants to make a deal. I don't know if Putin does. He might not. I don't know. He should make a deal. I think he's destroying Russia by not making a deal. I think Russia's going to be in big trouble. You take a look at their economy, you take a look at the inflation in Russia.
Donald Trump announced this the day after his inauguration on the 21st of January, and already on 22nd in social networks the White House Chief of Staff published an appeal to Putin and the Russian Federation.
Settle now and stop this ridiculous war. It's only going to get worse. If we don't make a deal soon, I will have no choice but to impose high tariffs, duties, and sanctions on everything Russia sells to the United States and other affected countries. Donald Trump, President of the United States, on Truth Social.
In addition to sanctions pressure, one of the strongest levers of influence on Russia, according to Donald Trump, could be a drop in global oil prices. During a speech via video call at the World Economic Forum in Davos, the President of the United States said that he would ask Saudi Arabia and the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries to lower the price of fuel. Then he said Russian Federation's war against Ukraine would end immediately. In the beginning of February, Donald Trump signed an executive order appointing retired Lieutenant General Kit Kellogg as the United States Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, and said that the United States made significant progress in relations between Russia and Ukraine.
I think the most important thing is President Trump's determination, strong action, quick decision-making, specificity, and making decisions from, still, a strong position. I think that's exactly what we need to get Putin to stop the war, to end the war, and to recognize that this was a very big mistake and we need to find a way to bring fair peace to Ukraine.
Another strategic track of Donald Trump's team is the settlement of the situation in the Middle East. During the election campaign, Trump repeatedly promised to stop the chaos in the region. Symbolically, the first foreign leader he invited to the White House was the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. During his meeting, the President of the United States proposed to relocate about 2 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. Instead of ruins, modern residential and shopping and entertainment complexes should appear there, he said.
I think that Gaza maybe is a demolition site right now. If you look at Gaza, there's hardly a building standing, and the ones that are going to collapse.
Following the talks, Donald Trump promised that the United States would take control of the Gaza Strip and have Netanyahu carte blanche to release the hostages. Later, in response to Hamas' refusal to hold an exchange, the President of the United States promised the militants all hell. And the sixth exchange since the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas began took place. And Trump also lifted restrictions on the supply of heavy aerial bombs to Israel. A shipment of Mk-84 bombs from the United States has already arrived in Israel.
Peace through strength. You understand that, right? It's called peace through strength. You know, they contracted for those weapons a long time ago in the Biden administration, and then Biden wouldn't deliver the weapons. But I look at it differently. I say peace through strength. They were sitting there.
It's not just the Gaza Strip that's the focus of President Trump's administration. The Arab states, especially Saudi Arabia, have enough resources to rebuild the Gaza Strip, but also Washington is interested in Saudi investment and the American economy. And certainly at the center of the White House's attention is Iran. Trump has stated his desire to conclude a new nuclear agreement with Tehran. Iran's nuclear program, the U.S. plans to bring under strict control. In the meantime, Donald Trump signed a memorandum to renew maximum economic pressure pressure on Iran.
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. We don't want to be tough on Iran. We don't want to be tough on anybody, but they just can't have a nuclear weapon.
The first decision of Donald Trump as the President of the United States touched upon economic changes. The media called the introduction of additional duties on goods from Canada, Mexico, and China the beginning of a trade war. The leaders of the states promised to respond with mirror measures.
The Chinese government calls on the United States to stop the politicization and turning trade and economic issues into weapons, stop harassing or crushing Chinese companies. China will take necessary measures to protect the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese companies.
The new format of relations with Europe is another vector of the Trump administration's international policy. The White House chief of staff is ready to help Europe completely abandon Russian gas. The United States can provide Europeans with 100% American fuel, he assured partners. But in addition to energy security, Europeans should ensure their defense capability. Europe is not doing enough for its own security and is losing its freedom, Trump believes.
We heard his call for European nations to step up. We are and we will. NATO allies pledged 40 billion euros in military aid for Ukraine in 2024 and then went on to deliver 50 billion. The majority, nearly 60% of that aid to Ukraine last year came from European nations. We did more on defence spending and will do more. So last year saw an increase of 20% in the defence spending of the non-US NATO nations. Europe is stepping up.
With his first executive orders, Donald Trump suspended international development aid to other countries for 80 days, began a massive downsizing of officials, imposed a state of emergency on the border with Mexico, and restricted migration. At the same time, Congress passed a law making it easier to detain and deport illegal migrants. Reported by Alexandra Zaslavitz, Larissa Petruk, UATV News.